Hey guys! This is the first video of a two-part series about my personal experience with AP exams this year. Today, I will tell you which AP exams I took and predict my performance on each. Part 2 of this series will be my recorded reaction to my AP scores. I am going to order the video from the easiest exam for me to the hardest. I took 9 AP exams this year. Before you start getting worried about my mental health, I would like to say that I chose my AP classes in a way that minimized how much actual work I had to do. US government and econ are graduation requirements here in Texas, so I was going to have to take each class regardless. The AP versions of each are not that much harder than their regular counterpart, and in the case of AP Macro, I had prior economics knowledge from academic decathlon. For AP US Gov, I was already somewhat familiar with our political process and government from having taken APUSH my junior year, as well as from watching the news, reading online articles, and browsing Reddit. AP Stats is a relatively straightforward class that I would honestly recommend to everyone because it helps you to interpret figures that you might see in news articles or online forums. In my case, I also needed it for computer science, which is my intended major. This would also explain why I chose to take AP Comp Sci A as well as Physics C, since many computer science programs do require a physics credit. On the subject of Physics C, my school doesn't offer it, but it does offer Physics 1 and 2. I took Physics 1 my junior year and Physics 2 this past year. Between the two classes, most of the material for Physics C was already covered, and I also took Calc BC my junior year, so I didn't need to learn many new concepts. All I really had to do was learn how to apply calculus to physics, as well as get accustomed to the format of the Physics C exam, neither of which was particularly difficult. My school started offering AP Seminar this past year, so I signed up for it, mostly because the alternative would have been AP Lit, which I would not have done well in. I took AP Lang last year, but I got a 3, so I retook it this year for at least a 4, which is what Rice requires for credit. English and Seminar are more skills-based and content-based, so I didn't have to do much studying for either exam. I am not recommending that you do this to yourself. If you plan on taking this many AP classes, make sure you know what you're doing. My score prediction for CSA is a 5, easily. I think I should probably disclose that I had prior experience with Java before taking CSA this past year, so my description of the exam's difficulty likely does not reflect the experiences of someone learning Java for the first time. The reason I didn't take CSA earlier was because my high school only started offering it this past year. Although I already knew most of what I was taught in my CSA class, there were a few new topics, as well as others that I needed a refresher on. All in all, this was the easiest AP exam that I have ever taken in my life. To be completely honest, I would not be surprised if I got a perfect score, although it is almost inevitable that I screwed up somewhere. The general consensus among the 5 or so people from my school who actually took the test was that it was quite easy. In fact, a friend of mine who was on the computer science team with me said, and I quote, "If I didn't get a 5 on that test, I will never get a 5 on any AP test ever," end quote. Some of the multiple choice questions took a bit of time to answer, especially recursion, but they weren't particularly difficult. I had anticipated that the FRQs would be a bit of a struggle since you cannot use an actual computer to write your answers. However, after doing a set of past FRQs, I realized that it wasn't that much slower, and I still finished in plenty of time. This was also true for the real test, and none of the FRQs were that bad, although I did make a few mistakes that I thankfully caught and fixed. My score prediction for Physics 2 is a 5. There are maybe 2 or 3 MCQs that I wasn't sure about. On the FRQs, I felt confident, but I'm a bit concerned that my explanations of physics phenomena might be a bit weak, which could cause me to lose some points. I tend to do better on questions that are more mathematically rigorous. There were 3 people at my school who took the test out of the 20 or so enrolled in the class, and the consensus among the 3 of us was that the test wasn't too bad. Aside from my explanations, the only other thing that potentially concerns me is the fact that the cutoff for a 5 typically hovers around the low 70s, so there isn't as much room for error as there is on, say, Physics C. Additionally, if the test was, quote, easier, as my classmates said, more points would be required for a 5. My score prediction for Macro is a 5. There were 5 or 6 MCQs that I was a bit unsure about, and one where I had to straight up guess. The FRQs were a breeze, and I wouldn't be surprised if I got all the possible points on it. The reason why Macro concerns me more than the exams I mentioned previously boils down to how the exam is scored. 2/3 of your score is multiple choice, meaning that the MCQs I may have missed will hurt me more than my FRQ score will help me. Additionally, Macro has the harshest curve, according to Albert.io, out of any of the AP exams I took this year. Another contributing factor is the fact that our teacher only got through the first 3.5 units or so I had to cram the rest of it the weekend before the exam, although I don't remember any questions from the second half of the course being too problematic. My score prediction for Physics C is a 5. I took both Mechanics and E&M, so I will discuss them both here. On Mechanics, I knew about 70% of the multiple choice, but the FRQs were much easier. I did leave one part of one question unanswered, and it's entirely possible that I goofed a bit on the FRQs, but my multiple choice gives me quite a bit of room to goof. On E&M, I knew about 80% of the multiple choice, but the FRQs were a bit tougher than on Mechanics. I left 2 parts of one question unanswered along with 1 part of another, but it still wasn't too bad. The main factor that makes these tests a bit more difficult for me is the timing. Normally, time is not an issue for me on AP exams, so Physics C was an exception. Had the timing been more similar to, say, Physics 2, I would have been able to get a lot more points. If you're considering taking either of the Physics C exams, make sure you're used to the timing. You only have just over a minute for each MCQ and only 15 minutes for each FRQ. The reason why my prediction is a 5 and not a 4 is because Physics C has a notoriously generous curve. And yes, I am aware that AP exams aren't technically graded on a curve, but I will continue to use the term in this video for convenience sake. On both exams, you could score around a 60 and still get a 5. If you look at the score distributions from past years, you will see that a 5 is actually the most common score on Physics C. My score prediction for stats is a 5. There are 1 or 2 MCQs that I was unsure about, and I was always able to narrow down the answer to 2 possibilities. On the FRQs, I know that I got part A of the first question wrong because we discussed it in class after the FRQs were released by College Board. Similar to Physics 2, I am concerned that my explanations may be perceived as weak by the graders since it can be somewhat subjective. However, I am confident in my multiple choice score and the fact that stats typically has a fairly generous curve. My score prediction for US Gov is a 4. As with stats, there were 1 or 2 MCQs that I was unsure about, and I was always able to narrow down the answer to 2 possibilities. If I had to estimate the percentage of points I earned on the FRQs, it would be similar to the percentage of points I earned on the FRQs for stats. The main difference is that the curve for US Gov is a lot harsher. I feel that my argumentative essay was badly written, although I did hit every point on the rubric that I remembered. My other responses were not too bad overall, although there were 2 other questions where I was a bit unsure about one part. My score prediction for Lang is a 4. English has always been my worst subject, mostly because of how subjective it can be at times. The MCQs were not too bad. They're essentially a harder version of the verbal section on the SAT, and there were only about 4 or 5 questions that I wasn't sure about. I felt great about rhetorical analysis, okay about synthesis, and not so great about the argumentative essay, mostly because I don't think my evidence was very strong. The curve is also not super friendly, and the multiple choice section is weighted less than the essays at only 45% of your total score. My score prediction for seminar is a 2. The written seminar exam was the worst AP exam I have ever taken, even worse than Human Geo my freshman year. Part A wasn't too bad, but the sources for Part B were not the easiest to use. You had an article about hospital workers not washing their hands, which is pretty standard. But then you have a Bible passage, an excerpt from Tom Sawyer, and a graph of the proportions of Nobel Prize winners who were women. The ironic part is that I actually read Tom Sawyer in my middle school English class, and I've also read the specific Bible passage that appeared on the exam, yet I still had a really hard time. I eventually identified a common theme of rewards, but I was not able to produce a full, high-quality essay that used this theme, so let's just say I decided to have a little fun with it once I ran out of ideas. Seminar is even more subjective than Lang because the prompt doesn't even tell you what to write about, and the written exam is 45% of your grade. As far as my portfolio is concerned, I threw my IWA together the day before it was due, and my IRR wasn't great either, although both were miles better than my written exam. The aspects of my portfolio I am happiest with are my individual and team presentations. I also don't have any information on how the seminar exam is curved, so I assumed the worst case scenario for my prediction. Although seminar is the exam that I feel I did the worst on by far, it is also the exam I care the least about, since Rice doesn't even accept seminar for credit. I fully deserve whatever bad score I get on my seminar exam in July. Before I end the video, I would like to briefly discuss my future plans for this channel. As of my uploading of this video, there is only 1 other video on my channel. Well, actually there are 2, because at the time I wasn't aware that YouTube automatically made your live streams available to watch after you concluded them, so I manually uploaded the recorded stream. Obviously, I will release part 2 of this video when scores come out. Other video ideas include a rigorous proof that 1 plus 1 equals 2 using set theory, a trombone solo that I really wanted to play this past year but couldn't due to COVID, reciting either the periodic table, the books of the Bible, the US presidents, or the first 32 powers of 2 by memory, or a vlog of orientation week. Long term, I'm not sure what I want to do with this channel. I take a lot of inspiration from YouTubers like Numberphile, Kurzgesagt, SciShow, and many more. I guess only time will tell. Anyways, have a great day!